Okay, let's now take a look at what some of the most famous UFO abductees or encounters have said happened to them. We're going to start off with Travis Walton. Now, Travis Walton is still alive, and he was an alleged UFO abductee who was working as an American logger with a crew in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona back in the 1970s. After driving their truck through that area late at night after a long day of work, they saw a hovering UFO off to the side, and they stopped to look at it. There were 6 other men in the truck with Travis. Now, Travis got out of the truck, and he went up to the UFO, and he was hit by a beam of light, knocked backwards and out. The other men in the truck became incredibly frightened and drove off. Now, Travis went missing for 5 days afterwards, and then he showed up in a nearby town and called a relative to come pick him up. After that, the men who were suspected of murder were cleared, and they passed lie detector tests, and Travis began to tell his story of what had happened to him over that 5-day period. And what he says is that he was abducted and examined or fixed up by these gray ancient race, whatever you want to call them, aliens, and that he also encountered Nordics on that ship as well. But it wasn't just a ship that he was taken in. He was taken to a different place. Because when he got out, he saw another ship parked. And from his descriptions, to me, it sounds like he was taken underground. So let's take a look at what he wrote in his book, Fire in the Sky, by Travis Walton. Okay, we'll start with page 36. There, a mere 90 feet above the ground, a strange golden disk hovered silently. The soft yellow haze from the craft dimly illuminated the immediate area with an airy glow. Okay, on page 37. I estimated the object to have an overall diameter of 15 or 20 feet. It was 8 to 10 feet thick. The flattened disk had a shape like that of 2 gigantic pie pans placed lip to lip, with a small round bowl turned upside down on top. Barely visible at our angle of sight, the white dome peeked over the upper outline of the ship. We could see darker stripes of a dull silver sheen that divided the glowing areas into panel-like sections. The dim yellowish light given off by the surface had the luster of hot metal, fresh from a blast furnace. Okay, page 38. I had become aware of a barely audible sound coming from the ship. I could detect a strange blend of low and high-pitched mechanical sounds. There were intermittent high, piercing, beeping points overlaid on the distant, low rumbling sound of heavy machinery. The strange tones were so mixed that it was impossible to compare them to any sound I could remember ever hearing. On page 38 as well. Suddenly I was startled by a powerful, thunderous swell in the volume of the vibrations from the craft. I rose to go and was halfway out of my crouch when a tremendously bright blue-green ray shot from the bottom of the craft. I saw and heard nothing. All I felt was the numbing force of a blow that felt like a high-voltage electrocution. The intense bolt made a sharp cracking or popping sound. The stunning concussion of the foot-wide beam struck me full in the head and chest. My mind sank quickly into the unfeeling blackness. I didn't even see what hit me, but from the instant I felt that paralyzing blow. I did not see, hear, or feel anything more. Page 77. They were awful. White skin, great big eyes. I sobbed in horror. That's when he encountered the gray-like beings. Now, page 80. My dreams were fraught with strange chalk-white faces and huge staring eyes, and I awoke from a start. That's when he was returned and he started to go back and remember. Page 89. For an instant I could distinguish the brushed metal luster of a ceiling in the softer, reflected glow about the light. The fixture seemed to be suspended lower and closer to me than to the ceiling. I deduced from the nearness of the ceiling that the hard, flat surface I was lying on was a raised table of some kind. Page 90. It was very hot and humid. The heavy air was almost stifling. It smelled slightly stale and muggy. I was sweating. Warm moisture beaded my temples. Feeling my jacket bunched up under my arms, I wonder why a nurse had not removed it. Okay, now again, he's going to encounter the creatures. On page 91, he wrote, I was looking squarely into the face of a horrible creature. A creature was looking steadily back at me with huge, luminous brown eyes, the size of quarters. I recoiled. On page 91, he wrote, I looked frantically around me. There were 3 of them. Hysteria overcame me instantly. I struck out as the 2 on my right, hitting one with the back of my arm, knocking it into the other room. My swing was more of a push than a blow. Was more of a push than a blow. I was so weakened. On page 92, he wrote, They stood still, mutely. They were a little under 5 feet in height. They had a basic humanoid form. 2 legs, 2 arms, hands with 5 digits each, and a head with a normal human arrangement of features. But beyond the outline, any similarity to humans was terrifyingly absent. Now he continues on to give quite a bit of information on what they look like on page 92 and 93. Here's what he wrote. Their thin bones were covered with white, marshy, mallowy-looking flesh. They had on single-piece coverall-type suits made of soft, suede-like material, orange-brown in color. I could not see any grain in the material such as cloth has. In fact, their clothes did not appear even to have any seams. I saw no buttons, zippers, or snaps. They wore no belts. The loose, billowy garments were gathered at the wrist and perhaps the ankles. They didn't have any kind of raised collar at the neck. They wore simply pinkish tan footwear. I could not make out the details of their shoes, but they had very small feet, about size 4 by our measure. When they extended their hands toward me, I noticed they had no fingernails. Their hands were small, delicate, without hair. Their thin, round fingers looked soft and unwrinkled. Their smooth skin was so pale that it looked chalky, like ivory. The skin was delicate and thin to the point of translucence. The subtle transparency made the life fluids just underneath the skin falsely suggest moistness of the surface, contrasting its actual dryness. The thin white membrane stretched over the curves of their small bodies without wrinkles. The bends of their fingers and necks made very small, slightly rounded folds instead of sharp creases. Their bald heads were disproportionately large, or to their puny bodies. They had bulging, oversized craniums, a small jaw structure, and an undeveloped appearance to their features that was almost infantile. Their thin-lipped mouths were narrow. I never saw them open. Lying close to their heads on either side were tiny crinkled lobes of ears. Their miniature rounded noses had small oval nostrils. The only facial feature that didn't appear underdeveloped were those incredible eyes. Those glistening orbs had brown irises twice the size of those of normal human eyes, nearly an inch in diameter. The iris was so large that even parts of the pupils were hidden by the lids, giving the eyes a certain cat-like appearance. There was very little of the white part of the eyes showing. They had no lashes and no eyebrows. The occasional blink of their eyes was strikingly conspicuous. Their huge lids slid quickly down over the glassy bubbles of their eyes, then flipped open again like the release of roll-up window shades. These huge, moist, lashless eyes and the milky translucence of their skin made their appearance slightly reminiscent of a cave salamander. But strangely, in spite of my terror, I felt there was also something gentle and familiar about them. It hit me. Their overall look was disturbingly like that of a human fetus. Okay, we've heard this before. The Nag Hammadi Library talks about it. So let's continue on what he saw in this place that he was taken. On page 98, he says, "The closer I got to it, the darker the room became. Small points of light became visible on or through the walls, even the floor. I stepped back and the effect diminished. I stepped forward and it increased again, the points of light becoming brighter in contrast to the darkening background. It was of light becoming brighter in contrast to the darkening background. It was like the stars coming into view in the evening, only very much faster. The matte gray of the metal wall just faded out to be replaced by the glinting, speckled, deep black of space. Maybe this is a planetarium-type projection, or good grief, what if this is actually some kind of viewing screen showing where the thing I'm in is?" On page 98, he wrote, "Space. Maybe it wasn't like the stars coming into view at night. Maybe it was the stars. In the eternal void of space. I was suddenly gripped with the icy fear that even if I could find a way outside, I would die in the airlessness of space. My God, the sweet earth could be millions of miles away." Page 99. "From where I sat, I could see stars all around me, even on the wall where I had just come through the door. The surfaces of the room were only faintly visible, but the doorway I had come through was as clear to see as ever. I could see nebulous clouds of tiny stars and dust in a band like the Milky Way, only more distinct than I had ever seen it on a clear night in the woods. Except for the door, the effect was like sitting in a chair in the middle of space." Okay, and then he continues and says, "Well, here goes," I said to myself. I rotated the handle of the lever forward, feeling the slow, even fluid resistance of it. I felt suddenly disoriented as the stars began moving downward in front of me in unison. Quickly, I pulled my hand off the lever. The stars stopped moving. The handle slowly returned to its original position. The stars did not return to their original position, however, but remained where they were. Okay, on page 99. I got out of the chair and walked to the edge of the room. As I did, the stars faded out, and the surfaces of the wall, ceiling, and floor came into sight. I moved over to one of the rectangles resembling closed doors." He continues on page 100. "I whirled around and looked at the door. There, standing in the open doorway, was a human being. I stood frozen to the spot. He was a man about 6 feet 2 inches tall. His helmeted head barely cleared the doorway. He was extremely muscular and evenly proportioned. He appeared to weigh about 200 pounds. He wore a tight-fitting bright blue suit of soft material like velour. His feet were covered with black boots. A black band or belt wrapped around his middle. He carried tools or weapons on his belt or in his hands. No insignia marked his clothing." Okay, on page 100, he continues and says, "The man remained silent throughout my verbal barrage. I was worried by his silence. I looked closely at this face through the helmet. He had a coarse sandy blonde hair of medium length covering his ears. He had a dark complexion like a deep even tan. He had no beard or mustache. In fact, I couldn't even see stubble or dark shadow or whiskers. He had slightly rugged masculine features and strange eyes. They were a bright golden hazel color, but there was something odd about those eyes, besides their color, that I could not quite identify. Okay, so he continues on, and he'll tell you that he met up with two other Nordic-looking beings who put a mask over him, and he passed out and then woke up on the street in a town that was nearby where he was abducted. And then he called his family. Now, to this day, he tours, and the people that were with him swear that this has happened. Now, let's look at Betty and Barney Hill. Now, Betty and Barney Hill are no longer with us, but they were one of the most famous UFO abduction cases of the 1960s and 70s. And other people wrote books about what had happened to them, but Betty Hill eventually wrote her own book. And what she wrote in it is quite interesting. Now, the name of her book was called A Common Sense Approach to UFOs. Now, on page 23 to 25, she wrote, "Finally, we decided our experiences may be dreams. 10 nights after our experience, I had a series of dreams for 5 nights which were similar to my experience during hypnosis. The question was, how did I transfer my dreams to Barney so that he thought he had a real experience? Also, I had not included his experience on Route 3 in the Indian Head area. If this was a dream, we loved it. Our feelings were very much like people who were involved in a very serious car accident. Suddenly, someone says to forget it because it is only a dream. The dreams were a great idea for us. All the pressure was gone. A few nights later, I woke in the middle of the night and had to face the facts. A dream could not explain the facts." And she continues on and says, "How could a dream explain how the tops of Barney's shoes became scuffed? I witnessed him being helped or dragged along the path in the woods. The strap on his new binoculars was broken. Both of our watches had stopped functioning and never did run again. My new dress, only the second time I had worn it, was torn at the seams in the lining along the hem and zipper. It became covered with a pink powdery substance which left permanent pink stains and has defied analysis by laboratories using all kinds of organic and inorganic testing materials. Plus there was the highly polished spots on the trunk of my car, about the size of a silver dollar, scattered in a circular pattern over an area about 2 feet. The spots caused a compass to react erratically when placed over them, but there was no other reaction from the rest of the car." Now, she continued on in her book to describe that she was taken up and she was examined, and so was Barney, that she had a needle put into her belly button. It was a pregnancy test, and that was a form of amniocentesis, but it was not known during that time. And Barney also had reproductive material removed, and later on he was given, or he developed warts, some kind of a growth, and he had to have it removed, and it was not, any kind of a venereal disease. But he died eventually in 1969, but she continued on to investigate not only UFOs in the area, but cattle mutilations and Bigfoot as well. And we don't hear about that too much. But what I found interesting, lastly, in her book was that she came to a conclusion that there are all kinds of UFOs going on and that they don't fly alone. And here's what she wrote as to why you don't often see them. She said, "UFOs do not fly around alone. They fly in squadrons of 100 or more. Most of them do not use any lights. They do not materialize or dematerialize. They turn their lights off and on. Most of them fly under 500 feet. When they leave, they travel at tremendous speeds. In this way, they protect themselves. They are not offensive, but they will protect themselves if forced to do so. No one walks up and knocks on the door. That's from her book, A Common Sense Approach to UFOs, Betty Hill, page 170. So she was going out and she was actually getting pictures of what these beings look like, or what these beings or what these ships were and where they were flying. She also went out and had someone create a sculpture of what these beings look like, and that's on the cover of her book, which is very much like the gray aliens. What's interesting too, though, is they describe them as being in some kind of black clothing with almost resembling Nazis, which I thought was a little off. I've never heard that description, but whatever, that was what she said. Now, she was also given a star map. They were talking to her about stars, and she drew it, and it was later revealed that that was a star map of Zeta Reticuli. So she and Barney Hill were very interesting UFO encounters as well. Now, there have been many other people throughout history that are famous that have seen UFOs. The Pharaoh Thutmose III in the Tuli Papyrus described fiery discs over Egypt in 1440 BC. Alexander the Great described encountering UFOs when he went in to attack India and was turned back because of it. Christopher Columbus allegedly saw a candle of light coming out of the water when he was headed towards the Americas during his first trip. But there is one of the most famous encounters of all that we need to discuss, and that is Jesus Christ. One of the most interesting UFO encounters of all is Jesus Christ. It starts with his birth and the Annunciation. A woman that we call the Virgin Mary was visited by an angel. That angel is often depicted as a Nordic androgynous being, and that angel told her that she would bear a son, even though she was a virgin. In Luke 1:26-38, it says, "In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and he came to her and said, 'Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you.' But she was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, 'Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God, and now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end.' Mary said to the angel, 'How can this be, since I am a virgin?' The angel said to her, 'The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child will be born holy. He will be called the Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son. And this is the 6th month for her, who was said to be barren. For nothing will be impossible with God.' Then Mary said, 'Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word.' Then the angel departed from her." Now that is known as the Annunciation. So not only do you have this virgin girl getting mysteriously impregnated with a son who would go on to have mysterious powers, but you have an elderly cousin who couldn't bear children also getting mysteriously pregnant, and she gave birth to John the Baptist. So, and as I said, Mary was visited by Gabriel, who is always depicted as an androgynous, blonde-looking white being. And we know the story of Jesus, but what is also interesting is there is a time that he was encountering something most mysterious and sounding like a UFO encounter, and it is known as the Transfiguration. In Matthew 17, it says, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, Tell no one about this vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. And the disciples asked him, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? He replied, Elijah is indeed coming and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything they pleased. So also the Son of Man is about to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. So here you have Jesus being turned white by the light of this cloud that went over and overshadowed them. But there was also a voice that projected from this cloud, and then it disappeared. Now, if this isn't some kind of a description of a UFO encounter, I don't know what is. And as I said, we don't know who the father was of this Jesus Christ. We just know that this virgin girl was mysteriously impregnated after a visitation from a Nordic androgynous looking being. So to me, I count this among a UFO mystery as well. And you'll find throughout history some of the most famous people that are recorded in history as major game players, changers, also had visions and dreams and heard a voice out of the sky telling them what to do. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody that hears those voices are really, talking to aliens, because a lot of people have mental illness as well. But I do find this rather strange. So now let's move on to the next part of the series, which will be the Sumerian texts that reveal quite a bit. Thanks.